Us. Just a quick announcement that this meeting is being recorded. This is a little bit new for us at Alaska Sea Grant. We're very used to working in person with you folks in our communities that we live and work in, but given the current state of affairs, we thought there was some good information that we wanted to share with you, and so we want to try this, use this Zoom method, so have patience with us. A lot of us teach courses this way, but don't usually have such a large audience, so there are going to be several speakers, and I'll just be facilitating. My name is Sunny Rice, and I'm with the Alaska Sea Grant Program, and I'm based here in scenic Petersburg, Alaska, coming to you from my home. And welcome everybody, whether you're in Alaska or from around the country. We're really pleased to see so many people and hope that the information that we have to share with you is useful and pertinent. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again, just do a few introductory slides before we get into the meat of socially connected, distanced, or socially, I can't remember what the title of our thing is, hang on. Catcher Cellar, information about becoming a catcher cellar. So hopefully everybody can see a welcoming slide there. Socially distant and locally sourced, selling your seafood dockside. We were inspired to want to put this together because there's a lot of different information out there. You're seeing headlines about concerns about the Alaska seafood industry. This one is from April 1st. Coronavirus related closures impacting U.S. fisheries and driving down prices. Well, at the same time, this one from March 31st, fresh seafood sales seeing a bump and frozen sales setting a record. So things are conflicted information and things are really changing. And we think that the catcher seller option might be a good one for some of you commercial fishermen out there. And so we want to share what we know about that. But first, just a real brief introduction to the Alaska Sea Grant Program. Our program is based at the University of Alaska Fairbanks, but we are part of a federal program. There are sea grants in states, every state that has a coast or a Great Lake. So we have a network, and you can see on the map here the dots where we're located, of both agents who are very focused locally on local needs and specialists who take a more statewide approach in looking at needs. And we do quite a bit of work with the commercial fishing industry and the seafood processing industry. So if you don't know, if you're in one of those communities and you don't know your local agent, see if you can find out who they are. Our jobs are to serve you and to help meet needs for information that you might have. You're going to meet many of us today through the course of this presentation. Another thing I wanted to mention before we get started a little bit further is that this webinar is going to be pretty much exclusively focused on what in the state of Alaska we call the catcher seller permit. And Gabe will go into more details on what a catcher seller permit allows and requires versus some of the other more complex direct marketing methods. We're going to be teaching a webinar, or a series of webinars, workshop on direct marketing, which will include a lot more information for those that are looking for a longer term solution that might include some processing on board. We'll go into all the different kinds of permitting required in the state, and that's going to be April 20th through 29th. And so you can look at that alaskaseagrant.org/workshops and sign up for that one. It's going to be 5 different sessions facilitated primarily by Gabe Dunham, who we're going to meet here in just a minute. So really want to refer folks to that one. Try to keep this to catcher seller. There are some small variations on catcher seller, and we got some of your early questions, and we'll try to answer those, but we really want to refer you to this, as well as to the Alaska Fisherman's Direct, or the Fisherman's Direct Marketing Manual, which you can find on the web page. You'll see the FishBiz project right there, and there's a web page called FishBiz, and on there you can find our direct marketing manual, which goes into a lot of more detail than we're going to go into today on a lot of things. So just a few things about Zoom. If you're new to Zoom, if you're looking on your screen there, and I assume seeing my slides, if you hover over the bottom, a dock should pop up with some some icons for you. There would be a video icon there and a microphone icon there, and they should be muted. Our tech person is going to be keeping those muted for us, but because we ended up having so many people registering this, we're going to keep it that way. So what we want you to do is, if you have questions, which we really want to try to answer, we want you to type those into chat. And so you'll see a little bubble that looks like a chat down there near the bottom, and you can click on that and type in your questions. You'll notice that there is an option to choose who you're sending your chat to, and we want you to choose Melissa Good. So take a look at that chat icon and choose Melissa Good there, and she will help us facilitate the questions. She'll pop in if we have questions that are pertinent to the speaker at the time, and then we'll do as much as we can with the remainder of our hour doing questions and answers from you as well for all of our speakers. And finally, a comment that we're going to be recording today's webinar, and we hope to be able to make that available for you probably on that FishBiz website in a few days. So a little outline of what we're going to be going over today. We're going to start, and I'm also going to introduce you to the rest of the Sea Grant team that's been working on putting this together for you. So Gabe Dunham is our Bristol Bay agent. He's located in Dillingham, and he will also be coordinating that longer direct marketing workshop. But he's going to talk to us today about permitting and regulations as they apply to catcher cellar. We have Quentin Fong. He is our seafood marketing specialist, and he's based in Kodiak. And he's going to be talking about basic marketing considerations in the catcher cellar context. Chris Sanito is our seafood technology specialist based in Kodiak, and he's going to be talking about seafood safety and quality and a little bit of tips in this era of COVID-19 as well. Julie Matweyu is our agent focused in Kodiak, and she's looked into what's going on, what the rules are in Kodiak, and a little bit more, we can all pipe in with a little bit more information about our communities and what you need to consider in your specific community. And then I wanted to introduce Melissa Good. She is our agent in Unalaska, and she's the one, again, that you're going to send your questions to via chat, and she's going to help facilitate the Q&A at the end. So, hi, Melissa. That is all I have. I would like to introduce Gabe Dunham, and we'll ask him to share his screen as well. Gabe, if you want to put your camera on for just a second so everybody can see you. Hello, Gabe, and take it away.
Good afternoon, everybody. Let me start sharing my screen here. There we go. All right. As Sunny mentioned, thank you, Sunny. I am the Sea Grant agent joining you from Dillingham, Alaska. I work out here and cover the Bristol Bay region. And this afternoon, I'm going to talk about some of the definitions and allowable activities, which are really informed by those definitions behind the catcher cellar permit. Generally, a catcher cellar is a person who is a CFEC permit holder that sells their commercially caught seafood, with the exception of mollusks, unprocessed from their fishing vessel for public consumption. And those underlying terms are what we're going to look at the definitions on, because those are really what are going to guide the activities that you're allowed to pursue with this catcher cellar permit. So first, the Department of Environmental Conservation, whom in Alaska are the ones that regulate seafood processing, define processing as any activity that changes the physical condition of a product, including butchering, thermal processing, cooking, dehydrating, freezing, pickling, salting, shucking, or smoking. So it's a pretty broad range. And I've got the reference there for the actual law that you can look up. So given that, it's also important to know that processing also includes packing any catcher cellar seafood into a package and sending it to a customer. That is also considered processing. So you're not allowed to do that as a catcher cellar. But what are you allowed to do? What does not count as processing? Icing does not count as processing. Gilling, gutting, or bleeding fish on the fishing grounds within a half a mile of the shore, or deheading shrimp, those items do not include are not included in that list of processing. So those are the things that a catcher seller can do to their product. So let's think about where you can sell your seafood. So as a catcher seller, again, this is something we define as something taking place, an activity taking place from your fishing vessel. So you can sell seafood from your fishing vessel. Now, set netters, a few set netters have situations where they don't sell or they don't use a skiff in their or a vessel in their operation. So for set netters, you can sell you can sell your seafood from your skiff. That's only if you can get it to a dock. You can also sell your set net caught fish if you don't use a skiff in your operations directly from your set net site. Now the key here is that there's no ground transportation involved. So for example, if you harvest your set net fish into your skiff and then you put your skiff on a tray somewhere and try to sell out of your skiff, that is not legal. Similarly, if you don't have a skiff and you're trying to and you're only dealing with your set net site, you can't put your fish, for example, in the back of a pickup or on a four-wheeler and move it to another location to sell it. So no ground transportation. So let's talk about also who can you sell your seafood to as a catcher seller permit holder. You can sell your seafood to the general public for non-commercial purposes, and this means that you cannot sell your seafood to someone who is going to resell it to someone else, but I'll get to the exceptions to that in just a second. You can also sell your seafood for use as bait. You can sell your seafood to restaurants, grocery stores, and established fish markets, but the catch is here that those persons or businesses must possess a DEC waiver to be able to buy that fish. And the real catch to this is that the possession of that DEC waiver is the onus is on the the catcher seller permit holder to provide proof that that person they sell to does have that DEC waiver. And the DEC does have a phone number and a person you can contact or a resource to provide you a list of current businesses with that DEC waiver. So lastly, you can also sell your fish to a licensed buyer, processor, or exporter within the state of Alaska. If you sell your seafood to someone outside of the state of Alaska, that's not allowed with just a catcher seller permit. You'll have to have a different permit for that. So finally, let me just review generally what are the things that you are responsible for as a catcher seller permit holder and in your catcher seller operations. First, touched on, you have to be a CFEC permit holder. There's of course the catcher seller permit, and if you're doing catcher seller activities with any federally managed species, there's of course another layer of federal permits that you'd be required to hold in addition to the state permits. For reporting, as a catcher seller, you are required to produce fish tickets, and that's for the Alaska Department of Fish and Game. A quick side note here is that you may be able to use the e-landings program to avoid doing paper fish tickets. Again, if you're working with federally caught species, you are going to be subject to additional reporting requirements for those federal species. Lastly, you want to think about taxes as well. Particularly, I want to note here that the catcher seller permit holder is not required to pay the fisheries business tax like some other forms of direct marketing are, but you are liable for local sales tax, any applicable salmon enhancement taxes. If you are in a region that has a regional seafood development association contribution, then you're also liable to pay that one as well. So let's talk a little bit about how do you get started in obtaining a catcher seller permit. The first step is to go to the ADF&G catcher seller page, and I've included the web link below. And you can apply there using their online method or their paper process. They're not terribly different, but the Alaska Department of Fish and Game is discouraging people from turning in their paper applications in person because of the current pandemic. So once your application is received and approved, you will receive your fish tickets and code plates. They're going to report through the e-landing system. This might be slightly different and you want to talk to ADF&G about that. But you're not ready to go, you're not ready to start your operations as a catcher seller quite yet. You need to make sure and register with the local ADF&G office, and also be sure to obtain any additional federal, of course, if you're working with federally managed species, or other permits, for example, those local species that Sunny mentioned earlier and that we'll hear more about from Julie later on. So one thing that I want to be sure and share with everyone are a couple of different contacts for some of the important entities that really care when people start selling their fish to someone other than a processor. And those, generally speaking, are the entity that manages the resource, in this case, the Department of Fish and Game. And there's a contact information there for the Seafood Industry Coordinator, who's a tremendously helpful resource if you're navigating this process. The entity that cares about food safety is, of course, the Department of Environmental Conservation, and there's contact information there. And lastly, any applicable taxes, or if you have any tax questions, if you're going to be engaging in operations that you think may fall under a fisheries business tax, then you want to contact all three of these entities, because they're really going to be able to guide you and help you figure out if you need a different permit besides that catcher seller permit. So, Sunny, that's all I had.
Great, thanks, Gabe. Melissa, any questions pertinent for Gabe that you've seen so far?
Yeah, we do. We have a couple of them. So I'll go through them, and that way Gabe can answer them for everybody that's on here. So our first question is there a standard line of business code for city sales taxes, or is this community by community?
I'm going to have to research that one. I don't want to give you an answer that I don't know is true. So that's one I'm going to have to get back to on.
Okay. Our next one is, do you need to have a CFEC permit in order to have a catcher seller permit?
Yes, you do. You need to be a CFEC permit holder to be able to obtain the catcher seller permit.
One question we have on here that I think I can address is if we're going to be covering catcher exporter licenses during this, and we do not plan on covering that during this presentation, but as Gabe mentioned, we have contact information for the ADF&G Seafood Industry Coordinator, and she has a lot of information and can ask all of your detailed questions about the other licenses. Next question to Gabe. Can you lift fish off the boat and sell it out of the back of a truck if the truck does not move from the dock location after the fish was put into the back?
The answer is no. The requirement is that the fish stay on the vessel, and really the focus here is on selling fish as close to the point of harvest as possible. So you're not allowed to remove the fish from the vessel and sell it.
We have two more questions. So the next question is, do you have to get a transporter license to ship fish to licensed buyers?
I wonder if we're having a technical difficulty there from Bristol Bay. It looks like the screen looks like Gabe's screen may be frozen. Do any of the other Sea Grant folks here know the answer to that one? My sense is that in Gabe's slide there, the catcher seller said that they could, you could sell to another licensed person if they had that permit. But let's see if we get Gabe back here. Gabe, I think we lost
There's
you.
also transport license or transport permit, sorry, that is available through ADF&G, and we can get back to the group with the answer to that as well.
Thanks, Melissa. Was there one more?
And the last question is a fish ticket required for each individual sale or for a sailor's accumulative sale over the rail?
Let's hold that one
We
till the
may
end
have
until
to.
we hopefully have Gabe back.
Yep.
Yeah, I think we might have lost
And that
him
is
a little
the
bit.
last of the questions for this section.
Okay, thanks, Melissa. All right, now I'd like to introduce Quentin Fong, our seafood marketing specialist from Kodiak. Hi, Quentin.
Hi. Hi. Actually, this will be, what I like to talk about is really when you're really looking at selling from dockside. Okay, so you're moving from the harvesting to directly selling to a customer. So the space, you're restricted to sell off your boat. Yes, you can sell it to a processor and you just pull your boat up, or a licensed buyer come down to your boat and unload. But some of you may want to think about selling at dockside directly to consumers. So you really need to start thinking about four things, that four items that I have on the list that you really need to think about. And some of it Chris is going to cover. One is the product itself. Okay, and I'm going to let Chris talk about product safety, quality, the appearance of the product itself, and you make it to be as attractive as possible to your buyer. Okay. The second part is really the physical environment that your customer is going to encounter, which is your vessel on the dockside. So in a way, you are turning your vessel into a retail operation, a retail space. Okay, so you really need to think about the cleanliness of your boat, the attractiveness of your boat, and the display itself. How you're going to display your fish, and also that are you going to put any signs up? Are you, when people come down to the dock, you need to think about how do you direct your customers towards your slots and everything like that. Okay? So, so you may want to think about cleaning up your boat, when you come in, and not directly go ahead and trying to sell your fish right away, and saying that give a cushion a certain period of time, or when you are coming into the dock, tidy up your boat a little bit. And also when you sell fish, you don't have a cigarette on your mouth, and so on and so forth. So one of the great things that you can learn about, I'm not going to spend too much time because this is more for a Q&A and this discussion, is to go to your local supermarket and look at what, if you have a Safeway or anything like that, go and look at the counter, behind the counter, where people are handling food, or go to the butcher shop that you have, and just really take a cue and learn from them, or chat with them about how they operate in terms of the attractiveness and cleanliness. The third point that item that I like to talk about is really communication. How do you communicate to your customer, right? I mean, especially if you start out in the business itself. One is that some of the folks that are selling on dockside already, what they do is that they develop a customer list by calling people that or get the word of mouth out in terms of, hey, I'm going to come in, with my boat, and I'm going to sell, I've got salmon, or I've got a rockfish or whatever that I'm available for sale, and these are the prices and things like that. Or, give me a call at a certain time, we can talk about, when you can come down to the boat and such. The other great thing that you use is really social media, right? I mean, even in Kodiak and elsewhere, when a boat comes in that has, whether live crab to sell or shrimp or something, a seller a fisherman would be going on, their local local Facebook site like Friends of Kodiak, right? Say, hey, I'm going to come into dock and such time, and I will have shrimp to sell. Okay? Or, again, the customer list, and then slowly build up your customer that way. And so that you have a volume that you actually may be able to pre-sell your product. Even if you're at sea, you can start giving people a call, and people already order fish from you, and then you can separate it out. And when you come into dock, and then you can just make the delivery. They will be waiting for you, or after you tie it up and give you some time to clean up and relax, they can come down and pick the fish up themselves. Okay? So, you can do a various different ways of advertising, including flyers and other things. The best thing to do is really word of mouth and start building up your clientele that way. So I'm just going to go through. And then the fourth item is really payment, right? The payment part, and how are you going to get paid, right? So there are basically several ways to do it. A lot of the folks down on the docks here in Kodiak, and even when I was in Rhode Island, people sell off the docks. You can do cash or check. But now with social distancing, you may not want to handle money and things like that, or a paper and things like that. There are other payment options. These are, you can go ahead and maybe as you become more successful, you have more clientele, you can use these credit card readers that can be put either on your iPad or your cell phone, mainly cell phone. So if you go to your local coffee shop, or you just happen to go to a farmer's market, you can see that, these are the chip readers that they can use. You can use your cell phone. And some of these companies, one of the companies that is very popular is Square. Square is one of the, I'm not trying to sell that product, because actually you can have Square, PayPal here, Intuit Go payment. So there are like 5 or 6 different of these credit card reader that you can subscribe to and work with and get yourself set up. Okay. So for example, if you have Square, you have a monthly, basically, they charge you by the percentage, a 2.75% of your transaction that you get, and you get the card reader for free. But if you want to do other things, such as you add Google Pay, and we'll get to that in it, and so on, so that you don't have a physical interaction by handling the card, they will charge you more money. Okay. The other part that you may want to look at, because of social distancing and not any physical contact, is to have either what we call peer-to-peer payment system, such as PayPal, or also Venmo. Venmo is actually owned by PayPal itself. And also you can think about Google Pay and Apple Pay, and you transfer it that way. Okay. So in your website or on Facebook or in your advertising, basically what you can do is that I take cash, check, credit card, or Google Pay or Apple Pay. Okay, so that people can download their app, or they're already set up already with PayPal, so that they are ready when they come here and say, hey, what is your email and how much? I'm just going to pay you through PayPal, and let's do it. You can do it actually right at the dock also. Okay? So these are some of the things that I'm not going to take a lot of time, because I just want a lot of discussion. This is not a workshop. This is more of a panel and discussion, and so that other people can share ideas, because I saw a couple of names here that people already have the experience in doing this. And so I'm going to leave it at that, and I'm going to turn it over to Chris and you.
Melissa, any questions for Quentin before we go to Chris?
We have no questions at this moment, but if anyone does have questions or think about them later, just go ahead and put them in the chat and we'll make sure to come back to them.
Yeah, and for those of you, first, welcome. I think we've had a few people join since we started. For those of you that are a little bit joined in a little bit late, and if you're new to Zoom, down near the bottom, if you hover over your bottom, you'll see a choice that says chat there. If you have questions, because there's so many of us, we decided to limit this a little bit, and my apologies for that. But you can just click the chat there and then choose Melissa. Melissa's the one who's collecting our questions, and send any questions into her. So now I'd like to introduce Chris Sinido, who is our seafood technology specialist based in Kodiak.
Sure. Thank you, Sunny, and good afternoon to everyone. So I wanted to just start by saying that catcher cellar operations are quite popular in areas that have a little more density in their populations, such as Oregon, California, even Hawaii. And it's quite common that fish will be sold directly off boats. I think Alaska, because of our smaller population size, it's probably hasn't caught on as much, but well underway there if you go to some of the harbors in California and Oregon. I guess some tips that I would like to throw out for selling directly off of fishing vessels, for one, is to decide whether or not you're going to invite customers to board your vessel, which in some cases can be a good idea, but in other cases it may pose a little bit of a safety risk, I think, to have customers, jump over your rail and board your boat. So that's something to consider. And then as far as, handling your catch and, handing it over to the customers, there's a few things to consider. One is, so through this catcher cellar permit, as Gabe explained earlier, there is no processing allowed. However, there are some steps, such as gilling and gutting, that can be done and are very convenient to the consumer, so that they could take home a gilled and gutted fish. I think that's a highly desirable way to present the fish. In the industry, we call that cut a princess cut, where we gut the gut cavity, maybe scrape the bloodline, and then remove the gills. And I would say insulated totes, the standard insulated totes, are great vessels for holding catch while you're selling. They could be layer iced in there, and provided that you, I think, pull the plug so that the ice can drain, the melt water can drain. I think that's a great way to hold your catch while you're selling. And keep in mind that you're now a food handler, so general food handling practices should be taken into consideration. Food contact surfaces should be impervious to bacteria, so we want to avoid wood in most cases. Look for UHMW cutting boards. That's that white cutting board that's typically used as surfaces to prepare fish. And if you were to go to the DEC, State of Alaska processing guidelines, they would have, there's a section in there that shows a table on an easy way to take standard chlorine bleach and make sanitizing solutions in a 5-gallon bucket. I don't know off the top of my head what those percentages are, but it's somewhere in the order of a couple of tablespoons for a 5-gallon bucket to make like a 200 part per million chlorine solution. Another important factor to consider is when you're thinking about prices, what are you going to sell this for? And you think about the recovery losses in the different forms. Say if you gut the fish versus selling it round, you're going to lose 20% of that. So you want to take that into account when you're determining your prices. Another important factor is you may or may not need a scale, but if you are going to sell it by the pound in the state of Alaska, in most other states, you will need a scale that is legal for trade. And not all scales that you buy are legal for trade, but if you're shopping for a scale, you'll want to look for that term that says legal for trade. And it's also required that you contact the state of Alaska for that scale. It's like a $25 annual fee, and have that scale certified. And if it's a scale that's legal for trade, they can stamp it and sticker it, and you'll be on their list. And every year that they come around, they'll recertify that scale. Yeah, another thing to touch on is supplies. If you're selling off your boat, you may, probably a great idea to have these types of supplies on hand. Those would be food handler gloves, possibly disposable gloves, and then food grade packaging. I've seen people transport fish sold off of boats in garbage bags, and that's definitely not a good idea. There are perfumes and all kinds of other things in garbage bags, and garbage bags are definitely not meant for food contact. However, if you were to contact a company such as Frontier Packaging or numerous other food packaging companies, you would see materials and bags that are definitely endorsed as food grade. Other things you might consider are gel ice for the customer to walk away with, insulated bubble wrap, perhaps, bags. Yeah, trying to think. Yeah, and one other thing would be a calculator to have handy. Of course, that's pretty common sense there. But and ice too. Ice is especially if you're an independent boat, you may not have access to cannery ice or processor ice. So there are some really nifty little ice machines that would probably serve your needs in a small boat, perhaps. So anyway, I think it's a great opportunity for some of the fishing operations to sell off their boats, and we are here to assist you. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, we have a couple.
Go ahead, Melissa.
Yeah, we have a couple of questions. Thanks, Sunny. Sorry. So someone was asking about suggested bags to use for carrying fish, for people taking fish away. I think you answered that in getting food safe bags from distributors, but maybe you want to touch on that again.
Sure. So those would primarily be polyethylene bags. Those are going to be your clear bags. So usually the polyethylene bags are the real flimsy. There's no structure to them, but they're primarily polyethylene. And then when you talk about like vacuum bags, those are polyethylene with nylon, and the nylon is what gives it the rigidity. But it would just be your standard. And oftentimes when I like to pack a fish away to give it to someone, I'll double bag. I'll put the first bag with a little flake ice in there, and then the second bag will be the product inside surrounded by ice. And it's good to go for a couple hours of chill there.
And then we have a couple of comments. One is that chlorine bleach is a good option as long as you're not doing the more is not better. And then also must use the correct ppm for sanitizer.
Absolutely.
And then we have another, oh, go ahead.
No, you're right. Yeah, more is not better on chlorine bleach. There's a certain parts per million where chlorine is most effective, and as it gets stronger, there is less available chlorine to react. So, good point. Yep.
Another comment is restaurants supply are good sources for packaging. Coolers can be very contaminated, and to not use styrofoam without bags as it's not allowed.
Very good point. Yep, you don't want to put raw seafood directly in contact with styrofoam. Not.
And then we have. And then we have a question. Would it be acceptable to have the customer come with their own bag, possibly a reusable bag?
I mean, possibly. I guess if I were a seller, I don't think I'd want to count on them having a proper bag, but possibly, I guess if they know what they're doing and they have a preferred way to transport that, I think I would definitely go with that.
And we have another comment that came up, and it's good to give with good handling and recipes. So home product will have good quality and safe product.
Absolutely. Yep. Your favorite recipe. I think that's a great idea.
And then we have a final question. If you are selling fish, do you still need to have a scale, or can a seller just write the number of fish sold and average weight?
Yeah, you can totally do that. You could sell it by the piece, and you could, but I think if you're charging by the weight, I think you do need to have a certified scale. But if you're saying, okay, my fish are, we're going to say they're average 5 pounds each, and we're going to sell 3 pieces for $15, but in fact, they might be 6'4", and, so I think it just depends if you're selling it by the piece or by the pound. And if you are selling it by the pound, the state does require that you have a certified scale.
And that is all we have. Thank you, Chris.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Julie Metwayu is our agent in Kodiak. She's looked into local issues a little bit. Hi, Julie.
Hi, everyone. I think we've kind of alluded to these local issues already, but I just wanted to share a couple ideas, couple thoughts with you. Pull this up. I think everyone can see the screen then. Yeah, we've talked about this potential for local requirements and other considerations. So additional permits or fees may be required by your local authority. So please check with your harbors, the city and borough governments for additional permits, business or vendor licenses, local taxes, and potential zoning regulations. I just wanted to share a quick example from the Kodiak, the city of Kodiak. In Kodiak, and this is effective as of January of 2018, a retail seafood sale permit is required for sale of fish over the rails. And the permit application, it's required by the city, but it's obtained and completed through the local harbor department. Please look at your local requirements again. As you can see, the harbor requires proof of registration of the city sales tax. They require the state registration, proof of state registration or federal registration and permits. And they also require a demonstration that you're complying with the vessel moorage arrangements. That's in the left panel there on the screen. And this is, again, just an example of one such requirement. On the back side of that, we see that the Kodiak harbor has some additional terms and conditions that you need to comply to. And it covers the specific location of the sails, what you've put into your permit, the cleanliness of the sail area, and addresses any potential hazards or disruptions to normal operations on the dock or at the parking area if you're perhaps pulling up to one of the public docks there. And they address seafood waste disposal. And so these are some of the, these actually cover these concerns that you might want to consider as you develop your plan, particularly in context to the COVID 2019 pandemic. You need to consider how you're going to actually sell this product and mitigate traffic, avoid congested harbors and spaces, and maintain that physical distancing. And so these are some of the things, and we can share this document with you. Really asked you to think through the considerations that you might have right there on your float there. Quentin has already referred to some of these considerations with payment, but this is a little bit of a useful guideline here. So again, we just encourage you to look for any required local authority requirements. And if anybody has any additional input on that, I'm just sharing this Kodiak consideration, but if we have some other input there, I think that'd be useful.
It seems like this, Sunny, Julie, a good step is to contact your harbor master where you think you're going to be selling from the dock right away, and they'll be able to direct you to what those things are, as well as making sure there's not a local sales tax, or that they're making sure you're covered on the local sales tax issue. I know of issues in the past where that wasn't being charged, and folks aren't very fond of that. So two things
It's
that's your responsibility to take care of.
Step, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that looks like a great document. We'll see if we can share that with everybody that registered after we're done, because that looks like a great outline for people, as well as the direct marketing manual. Okay, so for those of you that may have joined us even a little bit later, I just wanted to point you to the chat icon at the very bottom of your Zoom screen. And if you have a question or a comment, please click that chat icon, and then you'll get a chance to choose. All of us are here, but for our purposes right now, choose Melissa Good, and type your questions in there, and Melissa will read them off to the rest of the group. And Melissa, maybe right now we can go back to, share my video here. Maybe we can go back to the ones that Gabe was cut out on and see if we can finish up those and see what other ones come in at the same time.
Sure, let me scroll up to those. So the first one, Gabe, is a transport license necessary to ship fish to a licensed buyer, such as bringing the fish to an air carrier?
Good question. So I'm reading off of a guide directly from the ADF&G website, and it says as one of item D in their allowable activities. And I'll actually just share my screen, if that's all right. Bear with me again. One of the allowable activities that I've highlighted right here, I guess it might show up as gray to you, but it says that you are allowed to ship fish to a licensed buyer, processor, or exporter within the state. So that says that under this catcher seller license, you are able to do that.
Great, thank you. And our next question is a fish ticket needed for each individual sale or the accumulated over the rail sales?
Now, since the fish ticket is the purpose of the fish ticket is to keep track of the harvest, I honestly don't have I can't find a good conclusion for this question. I'm gonna have to get back to somebody later, unless either Quentin or you, Melissa, have any insight to that answer.
I guess is that it's considered a landing, that everything that you brought to the dock was a landing and you need a fish ticket for that. Not that you need one for each individual sale, but I don't know that for certain. So you should contact your fish and game person. You're going to be working closely with them anyway as you start doing these fish tickets, and be sure to ask them that question.
Good one though.
Everyone, this is Julie. I just wanted to pipe in there too. It's an interesting question, especially related to the certified scale, whether, how to document your landing if you don't have that certified scale on the boat and you're coming in with a load. You need to get a weight measurement on that, correct?
Yeah, that's a perfect question to ask your ADF&G contact person.
Another question directed at you, Gabe, is could you touch on the half-mile limit on fish not processed that you mentioned?
Right, so this starts to depart a little bit from ADF&G requirements over to DEC requirements. And the concept is here that they don't want people basically, even though you're only talking about gill and gut, the concept is that they don't want people dumping gills and guts right on the shore if you're doing this work close to shore, and that's hence that half-mile rule. Now, if you have any more questions about that, if you have certain specific scenarios you think it applies to you, then I would encourage you to contact the DEC first about that question.
And now we have a list of questions that are coming in, so I will read them off, and maybe someone within our Alaska Sea Grant group here can answer them.
Melissa, I'm going to interrupt you for a second because I got a chat from somebody who works for Fish and Game. In Prince William Sound, at least for shrimp, it's one fish ticket per landing and not for each individual sale. And that would be my guess. But again, just check with your local Fish and Game person about that.
Right, so our next question is, do we have any guidelines for the COVID-19 issue?
Chris or Quentin want to tackle that?
Sure, I could try. I mean, so I know there's some guidelines that are intended for processors primarily, and those are being developed, if not already developed in certain communities. We had a radio program on this morning on our local public radio where it brought in a few of the seafood processors, and I believe a gentleman out from the Bristol Bay region, and they were describing what's taking place in the canneries, and it's kind of based on CDC guidelines for the most part, but they're going, it sounds like, above and beyond, being very careful on introducing new people into the community, you know, and all kinds of extra precautions. I had heard the fellow from Bristol Bay was really saying how he's trying to put the brakes on the fleet coming up to Bristol Bay any earlier than May 15th. But it was quite an interesting conversation. I didn't catch it all, by the way. So I would say, as far as catcher sellers go, I think the same social distancing practices that are recommended on a national front should definitely be in place. You know, food is not, this type of virus is not transmitted by food, which is good. Other viruses are transmitted by food, but this COVID virus is not. But I would definitely, for anyone that's coming into contact with the general public, you need to be aware of what these CDC guidelines are and follow them, and just be very cautious.
This is Quentin here. Yeah, I'd like to add a little bit. You know, one of the things that you may want to think about also, you know, is, again, you're doing retail, right? So there may be questions by a customer in terms of, hey, you know, is seafood, you know, transmitting, you know, although that Chris just said it, at the National Fisheries Institute, there is, you know, just go on that website. There is a Q&A to actually, you may be able to download as a flyer or some information that you can give out saying that, hey, you know, seafood is really not a transmitter of the COVID-19. Okay. Again, Chris, now I'm going to ask you a question. You know, you are part of the technical committee with the Alaska Seafood Marketing Institute and Seafood Quality. I mean, are they giving out any of these flyers or guideline for, for processors, or perhaps that our audience or our catcher sellers can also use some of that information for the public also?
Yeah, they are working on it. There's a committee with ASME that is looking into it. I don't think they've made anything available to the public quite yet, but I have seen some things going back and forth where there is a committee that's trying to tackle that.
And also that, I spoke very briefly with our local Safeway manager just on passing about, because we, again, now you're moving into the retail space, they require they suggest to their, to the cashiers and everybody, the butchers, wash your hands every hour, okay? Make sure that there is a hand sanitizers, which is hard to get, your hand sanitizers on the checkout counter. And then they are installing plexiglasses now. Perhaps wear a mask, when you talk to the public, any physical barrier, give your customer confidence that your fish is safe and you are conducting a good business.
Hi, everyone. This is Julie Matwee in Kodiak, and I just wanted to point out that I did share some resources that are being put out in the Kodiak community. This draft COVID onboard procedures is really just coming into fruition, and things are changing. So keep your eyes open for different documents. I know BBRSD is putting out information, but I just wanted to reiterate, Sunny and I were on a direct marketing workshop last week or 2 weeks ago, and there was definitely considerations to be had regarding the social distancing, the physical distancing in place, and managing a potential group of people coming down for your product in relation to direct sales. So those are some of the considerations you might want to have. We put the every 6 foot marker on the dock and keep people distant and separated as they're coming to get your product. But yeah, this is an ongoing concern, and rapidly developing information is coming out.
That's a great one, Julie. There was also a comment of hoarding, people hoarding, even their sort of standard customers suddenly coming in and wanting more fish than they normally would, and not being able to serve the rest of the people. So it's something to think about if you think that might be happening, is deciding how much people can buy at one time. Maybe you can just limit it to 1 fish at a time if you see that happening. So yeah, another one with the marking out on the dock is a great idea. Here's 6 feet. And so both for your safety and because what Quentin's talking about, that very important image that you're presenting to your customer. They want to be buying healthy, fresh food. So other questions, Melissa?
Yeah, on the same lines of COVID-19, there's a question on, are there any additional restrictions from harbors because of the COVID-19 virus?
I think that's going to be a conversation you have in your own community. I spoke with our harbor master yesterday, or harbor office rather, yesterday, and I think again it's ongoing and developing discussion. I mean, I don't think everyone has the answers right now, so bringing this up in your community is where you need to start.
Oh, and that's a great question, because some communities have these quarantines, these 2-week, and that depend on where the vessel is coming from, I think, and that's going to depend on the quarantine. But yeah, if you're required to quarantine for 2 weeks and entering a new community, if you've come in from another community, that may be an issue to talk about for sure.
Next question is, participants are wondering if we could touch more on selling to grocery stores.
So, I'm not going to talk about regulations. Maybe Chris can, definitely you can get into contact with your local grocery store. We're talking about local right now, right? But if you're, because at the end of the day, you cannot transport the fish, it's really their willingness to come down to your boat to pick up your fish. I mean, are they willing to do that, right? You know, maybe some of the IGAs, and I don't know if you know, your local Safeway or your Fred Meyers would have somebody that want to come down, or they may pay a licensed buyer to come down and pick up your fish. Okay. So, I mean, this is something that you need to develop a personal relationship. You know, the seafood business, as you know, as fishermen, it's all about personal relationships, right? I mean, you have a personal relationship with your processor, and you know, sometimes they give you a extra nickel a pound for your fish, you know, just because you keep it on ice, you look a little better, and so on. It is so same thing with your local grocery store. You know, they may want to come in and they said that, hey, you know, I'm interested, but at least from a Kodiak point of view, I have not seen any local seafood in that store. Chris, maybe you have something to add?
Yes, same here. I have not seen locally sourced fish in our national Safeway chain here, which is kind of surprising to most people, that you wouldn't see that in our big store. But I mean, I have seen, sockeye salmon. It looks like it's been frozen, refrozen, kind of hard to say where it came from. But I think that's a great opportunity, if you're able to make connections directly with local grocers, a 50-pound, wet lock box with standard poly liner and 3 gel ices, and that's kind of the standard pack. It could be princess dress. That would be a great item for a seafood retailer then to take it and retail it out of there. So I think that if you're in the right community, you might want to check with your contacts at the local grocery stores and just see if they might be interested, and then offer them a good quality pack and nice new clean boxes, and use good materials. And I think you've got a good shot at having a business with them.
Next, we have a comment that AMC has produced COVID-19 guidelines for fishermen, and AMC is the Alaska Marine Safety Education Association. And I just want to note that I put a link in the chat box to everybody, so you have that resource available to you. Next question we have: if you bring 20 fish to the dock and only sell 15, what is the process for taking surplus fish home?
I can answer that. I think the only thing you need to do is indicate on your fish ticket that there are some portion of your catch that are going to be included as just personal use. So it'll be recorded on your fish ticket.
Our next question is there a sales tax on food fish?
Yes, there is. I mean, at least from a Kodiak point of view, it's a 7% tax if you do it from the dock. It's part of that. It's part of the direct sales. It's a retail. You're going into a retail operation. So at least in Kodiak, you got to pay sales tax.
Another question is, in Alaska, if the customer pre-purchases, can they be processed without the oversight as the customer already owns it?
Can you
Chris?
repeat that, Melissa? And maybe Gabe can answer that, or
Right.
Chris.
In Alaska, if the customer pre-purchases, can they be processed without the oversight as the customer already owns it? I think what this question is asking, if someone purchases the seafood and then is the owner of that fish, could it then be processed without having maybe the processing license?
No, I think you would be under the requirements of the DEC processing regulations if you're going to do anything, regardless of who owns the fish. If you're going to cut into it, then you're going to have to follow DEC rules and obtain that appropriate permit.
One of our next questions is they're looking for examples of good small ice machines. Do you have any, Chris?
Yeah, so there's a number of, small ice machines. Like, for example, there's, if you look at the brand Hoshizaki, and I believe that's a Japanese, but they're widespread in the restaurant industry. And, I own a little Hoshizaki machine, and it'll produce about 1 full tote of ice in a 24-hour period. It is 110 volt, so it's about the size of a I don't know, it's like 24 by 24 by 24, and just a water hookup, and it'll crank out the ice. Then you can get, it goes up from there. There's flake icers that are on the order of $15,000 that will do probably 3 times that or twice that. And then it goes up from there. You can spend lots of money on an ice machine. But Hoshizaki brand is one that I would look at for small ones. Those are very reliable, easy to fix, and I've had good luck with that.
Chris, this is Gabe. Follow up to that. Is that a cube ice or a shave ice?
It's
flake ice machine.
Flake ice. Yeah, it produces a flake ice.
Great.
This just
And
makes
Chris,
me
perhaps
wanna,
we can just provide a link to people on this example that you're giving. And we can
Sure.
probably send that out.
Yep, I'd be glad to.
this makes me think of something I heard with some cooperative extension folks, farm ag people, that in thinking about these kind of purchases, we want to be taking long-term views on our businesses. So I wouldn't want somebody running out and buying an ice machine now for this year if it's not going to also make sense for them next year and in September. So we're feeling a sense of urgency, I think, because of what's going on right now. But as far as, investments and things like that, try to take the long view as you can. And if it's something that you're seeing as a long-term great business opportunity for yourself, by all means. But if it's a sort of a slightly panicked decision based on what's going on right now, then try to take step backs if we can on that.
Hey, this is Quentin. I want to add something about tax. Thanks to Jeremy Abina from Kodiak. He reminded me that aside from a sales tax, there's also a landing tax too. So if Jeremy you want to expand on that.
Oh, Quentin, because we had so many people, we don't have that option.
Oh, okay, all right.
For people to share broadly. So.
Okay, thanks.
One question that we do have that just popped up is that how is the landing tax collected?
Anybody?
I think sorry, this is Gabe. I think a good person to direct that to is going to be your contact with the Department of Revenue.
And we can send out that contact information that we posted earlier to everybody in this group as well.
Okay.
We have one last question.
Sorry, because Jeremy answered, Jeremy said that in Kodiak the landing tax is collected by the city of Kodiak.
And we have a final question of, have any fishermen used the CSA model for a subscription type of pre-purchasing?
I haven't heard of any individual fishermen in Alaska doing it. That doesn't mean they aren't. There are things like, and maybe Julie can pipe in a little bit more about a couple that are organized by NGOs, but aren't individuals. But there are some interesting models that, particularly in multi-species fisheries, like in the South Atlantic, where they're having people buy shares and then they're distributing that the buyer doesn't necessarily know what species they're going to get, but they're trusting their fishermen that they're out there catching good stuff that they're going to be able to use. That person gives them a lot of information about, oh, this is what this fish is, and this is how you cook this. We don't have many multi-species fisheries like that, or any, do we? But that's the only example I know of, and that one's down in South Carolina. But Julie or anybody else?
Well, yes, there is sort of like a CSA model by Sitka Salmon Shares and also the Alaska Marine Conservation Council. The AMCC is very, too bad that Teresa, I don't know if you can chime in, Teresa Peterson here, they have developed, worked up a relationship with the rockfish fleet, and they do some custom processing in some of the smaller processors here and take ownership of it, and also has a subscription, assemble fish from all over, sometimes king crab and so on, and do it in Anchorage. And I don't know if now they were starting their operation in Fairbanks a few years back, but I cannot speak for that. Perhaps Teresa can elaborate on that some other time.
It looks like Dave might be able to. Teresa, would you like to try talking and see if we can hear you?
Yes, hi, can people hear me?
Yes.
Oh, great. Yes, we have our Catch 49 community supported fisheries model. And currently we have been working with our vessel here in Kodiak, the Patricia Sue, that brings the fish in. And we've been working with Jeremy Abina on Kodiak Fresh Seafoods to have that then custom processed. And it shipped to both Anchorage, and then this week we're opening some purchase opportunity in Fairbanks due to kind of increased interest in supporting both local fishermen and the domestic retail market. And it's been interesting that this week we've seen increased interest from the Alaskan consumer to seek out, high quality, good seafood like we have in Alaska, but also to, kind of take it a step further to support, our small processors and our small scale fishermen. And I'm also interested as, a community resident in Kodiak in providing some of this fish to Kodiak residents and the ability to sell off the boat. So I've been working through the process of getting the catcher seller permit, working with the city of Kodiak, and then working with the harbor master to make sure we're doing it all right. And I think, webinars like this are really, really helpful to help those of us with really no experience in this type of entrepreneurial activity to get a sense of where you go, who you ask, what the best way to move forward with it is. So thank you for putting this together today.
Thanks, Teresa, for sharing also. So Melissa, are there other questions coming in via chat? We're 15 minutes over, but any other last ones?
Yeah, let's see. Looks like we have a comment and a question. I'll do the comment first. And it says, we have a Catch 49 CSF model, and we work with fishermen throughout Alaska to provide the fish desired. Perhaps the Catch 49 can be put into the chat. Maybe a link to the information on that to everybody. And then we have a final question of any tips on where to get totes or half totes for a reasonable price.
Yeah, everything except the reasonable price I'm aware of. Seems like those totes and half totes are quite expensive. I don't know, there are some, occasionally you'll see used totes come up for sale, but I don't know. The last time I checked, for a full size tote and a lid, it's pretty spendy, like $600-800. Yeah, Daco is kind of the go-to place for those injected molded insulated totes. They're down in is it Renton, Washington? I forget, but most of the processors will buy from Daco. Frontier Packaging also sells a different brand of insulated totes. So, and then locally, your marine supply store, you can buy insulated totes as well.
I think let's wrap it up with that one. Thanks everybody so much for coming. I want to put a couple more resources out to everybody. So hopefully on your screen right now, you're seeing my email address. Feel free to contact your local agent if you want, but if you have other ideas, things that our job is to get you the information that you need. So if there are other Sea Grant webinar topics that you have ideas for, please email me, or comments about this. I'm happy to hear those as well. So email me or any of the rest of us that you've heard from Alaska Sea Grant here. And I just wanted to mention one more time, if this is something that you're seriously considering as more than just a stopgap measure, I would highly recommend this 5-part workshop on seafood introduction to starting and operating a seafood direct marketing business. So it's all via distance, and it'll be a bit more casual because it's limited to the number of people. So there can be lots of give and take, talk to people that are already direct marketing, continue to answer those questions and develop your own ideas. And one more resource I wanted to point everybody to is the FishBiz website. So everybody that you've heard from Alaska Sea Grant today is part of a group we call FishBiz. And we just get together to talk about what fishing businesses need in the state of Alaska and how we can meet those needs. And we have a website here. It's fishbiz.seagrant.uaf.edu. And under the publications, you can find our direct marketing manual. And down on these other tabs, there's a lot of good information depending on where you are in your business. So unless there's anything else, I'll open up for just a second to any of the rest of our organizers. Okay. Thank you everybody so much for attending. Please stay safe and healthy and take care, and send me an email if there's something else you think we can do for you.
Thank you, everyone.